So first of all, I'd like to start by giving some background and history into public forum. So public forum is a global style of debate. It originated in America in, I think, 2002 with the Ted Turner debates, and it has since spread to places like China, the Gulf states, Europe, India, Taiwan. The United Kingdom has a very big public forum community. They actually start the public forum debate season, and it's a really big competitive sport, competitive activity that's everywhere, really everywhere across the United States. Every county you go is going to have a public forum debate section. So this effort, this Romanian public forum debate was introduced to Romania in the summer of 2019 by Teddy Ganea, so by myself, with the collaboration of Liceu and Mircea. And one of many of the reasons why I wanted to introduce public forum to Romania is because I really enjoyed it. And I thought that, you know, Romanians, you all should have the opportunity to enjoy it too. I'm also half Romanian, so my parents have both come from Romanian. So I'm a Romanian and also an American. I live in New York City, by the way. And I just, you know, I wanted to also serve as a sort of link between the two countries. But ultimately, this isn't really about me. It's about you. It's about us. And I just like to say that, first of all, I'm really, really privileged to be able to be here and to be able to talk with and meet all of you new students and have all this great time spreading public forum. I'd also like to thank the many, many, many collaborators we've had, collaborators that we've had for the 2020 Nationals public forum debate tournaments, collaborators that we're having for this tournament, the 2020 Black Sea tournament. In particular, I'd like to thank Stefan Mindirigiu, who is the executive director of this tournament, and I'd like to thank Professor Eduard Mindirigiu, who is the tournament director of this tournament. And it's fundamentally, it's their tournament. It's under the umbrella of Romanian public forum debate, and they've just been doing really, their support has been invaluable. And there's just so many other people that I could thank. Obviously, I could probably thank people for an hour long because there's just been an incredible amount of support for this in Romania. Obviously, we don't have an hour for that, so I'm afraid I'll have to move on. Okay, let me see if I can screen share this. Does everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it a full screen?
It is, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Perfect.
Yes.
Great. So first off, the topic of this tournament is resolved on balance, social media benefits society. So what does that mean? Resolved is just the word that public forum people use to indicate the topic. What we're really what the topic is social media benefits society. And so you could argue the pro and say that the existence of social media is a good thing for society. And you can define society however you want. You could define it as Romania, you could define it as the world, you could define it pretty much whatever you want. Then you could argue the con side, which is that social media does not benefit society. In other words, that social media is actually a harming factor towards society. And so that's just the topic. I highly recommend you prepare this topic for the tournament. Just as one side note to make very clear, I know that some other types of debate, like world schools, have multiple topics in their tournament. That's not going to happen in this tournament. The only topic you'll be debating for this tournament is social media benefits society. And so that gives you the chance to really explore the topic and find all of the information you need. So what is public forum? We talked about its introduction story a little bit. I just wanted to add that we do have US collaboration on the books. For example, with Horace Mann School, we're working towards that. Now, public forum is in the public forum debate, you will have these debate rounds. So in each debate, there will be 4 debaters, 2 teams of 2 each. Within those teams of 2, you will have 2 speakers, right? A first speaker and a second speaker. And each of these speakers will give 2 speeches depending on their role, usually 7 minutes or 6 minutes of total speaking time. Now, in public forum debate, there's an emphasis on hard evidence as well as logical points. So this means you need logic. You can't just spit out a bunch of studies, but you also will need some studies to support your logic. So it shouldn't just be abstract ideas, it should be great ideas with some concrete evidence, newspaper articles, studies to anchor your argument. And lastly, public forum debate is a concise activity. When the speech time is 4 minutes, that means that the speech time is 4 minutes. So you kind of have to finish your speech by 4 minutes. The speaking time is limited, and this will encourage you. This is actually a good thing because it encourages you to focus on using as few words as possible to get an idea across, which will actually make you more persuasive in the long run. So again, why public forum? First of all, it's a great opportunity to do public speaking in English. So you practice your English skills, you practice your public speaking skills, you grow your confidence. It's a perfect trifecta. There's also persuasiveness. Obviously, if you practice persuading people in many debate rounds, you will also get better at persuading people in real life. Also, the research and logic skills that are developed in public forum debate help a lot in school. There was a study conducted in New York City a while back that said that students' grades, I think, on a standardized exam went up by 24% after just 6 months of study of a public forum debate. Then lastly, we have this focus on the impact. So a crucial theme in public forum debate is that it's not enough to just be right. You have to prove why your being right matters. So you could have an argument and you have your claim, which is what you're trying to prove. And then you have your warrant, which is what proves it. But you need the impact. You need to explain why it matters that you're right. You need to explain why the judge should care why you're right. So briefly for this tournament, pretty much you're going to need a partner, a computer or a phone. So try to get the most reliable connection you can. Zoom software, dress up if you can. Try to look clean and professional. Also take your thinking hats and be ready to have fun. Lastly, the only thing you'll need to prepare is a 4-minute speech for the pro side and a 4-minute speech for the con side. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So actually, before we talk about the structure of the debate round, let's go to just talking about how an argument looks like. So the arguments in public forum debate, it's a 3-step, pretty simple structure to making a complete argument. First, you have your claim. It's the main point of your argument. It's what you're trying to prove true. And your claim should not just be repeating the resolution. For example, let's say on the social media topic, my claim should not be social media is bad. Instead, my claim should be something like, if I'm on cons, something like social media increases mental health problems. Then I have the warrant. So this is my evidence and my logic that I'm using to support my claim. So this is where I prove my argument is true. Lastly, I have the impact. So that explains why your argument matters to the real world and why the judge should vote for you. So the impact is super important, right? Because the impact is what is going to win the round for you. The impact is what compels the judge to vote for you. Just to give an example illustrating how important the impact is. Let's say I come and I bring in an argument, and for 4 minutes, I prove to you that my mom's favorite color is orange. So let's say I prove it, and you cannot disprove me, because I know my mom better than you. But here's the thing. In a debate round, that argument would not count, because sure, my mom's favorite color is orange, but the impact of that is non-existent. It doesn't really matter. Whereas the impact of changes in the economy or lives, those are big impacts that have an importance. So obviously that's an extreme example. Long story short, you need to explain why your arguments are important. And in general, you should aim to write your arguments in this order. So you tell the judge clearly, here's my claim, here's my warrant, and then you say your evidence and your logic. Here's my impact, and you explain why your argument matters. Okay, so this structure of argumentation should be used throughout the round, pretty much. Now, let's actually go briefly through how the debate round is going to look. So, once again, 2 teams of 2 each. Each team has a first speaker and a second speaker. So, at the beginning of the debate round, the first speakers of each team, let's say speaker 1 and speaker 2, they are going to say their constructive speech. This is the 4-minute speech that gives the opening arguments for your side. So if you're the pro team, you're going to talk for 4 minutes about why social media is good. And this speech is pre-written from home. You don't need to memorize it. You don't need to make it, you should not make it up off the top of your head. Instead, you should simply read it, but you should practice reading it. So at home, you should read your speech several times to make sure that it's 4 minutes. Because if your speech is 5 minutes, you're not going to be allowed to finish it. And you want to practice reading it to get comfortable with the words so that you can be persuasive when you talk with the judge. After the constructive, which is 4 minutes, the 2 first speakers, so 1 from each team, will debate each other in the first crossfire, which lasts 3 minutes. So now what is crossfire? Crossfire is something that's very important. It's basically when the 2 speakers get to ask each other questions and spar with each other in real time. So just to make clear, for the constructive speeches, you read for 4 minutes and the opponent is not allowed to interrupt you. No points of information, nothing like that. Instead, in the crossfire, the 2 speakers can ask each other questions, and that's where you can do your points of information and stuff like that. And this is really important because you have to show spontaneity. You have to show that you understand your arguments. You have to figure out the best questions to ask. And crossfire is really one of the best times to persuade the judge and to show the judge that you are a powerful speaker. In general, I recommend asking 2 types of questions in crossfire. The first is to clarify things. So if your opponent said an argument that you don't understand, you should ask them to make it clear in the crossfire. Why? Because if you don't do that, then your opponent will just be able to keep on talking about their argument and you will not be able to respond to it in rebuttal. So it's very, very important. If they say something you don't understand, you should ask them to re-explain in crossfire. Then the second type of question that you want to ask is a type of to try to poke holes. So you want to ask questions that get at the underlying assumptions of an argument, right? When every argument is going to have its assumptions. And so you want to see where the logical problems are and to see if the opponent can protect their argument. So crossfire is 3 minutes. After the crossfire, the 2 people who have not spoken yet from each team. So first speakers have spoken, but the second speakers will now show up and give their rebuttal speech. So this is a 4-minute speech. And in this speech, they will disprove and attack the opening arguments. So if I am speaker 2 of team A, I will come up there and I, for 4 minutes, will attack the arguments that the speaker 1 of team B made. And in rebuttal, you generally want to focus on two types of arguments. You could have arguments that are trying to disprove the opponents and defensive, or you can have arguments that agree with your opponents, but say that your opponent's impact is bad. So for example, in online school, let's say one opponent is saying, oh, judge, online school will lead to less homework, and less homework is good for students because it decreases stress. You kind of have two tacks. You could say, one, judge, online school is not going to decrease homework. Their argument is false. The other thing you could try to do is to say, judge, we agree with them. They will decrease homework. However, homework is good because it helps students learn. So that's an example of that. After the rebuttal, which is 4 minutes, the two speakers, the two people who have just spoken, will enter the second crossfire and will alternate asking each other questions back and forth for 3 minutes. After which comes the summary. So the summary is a 3-minute speech done by the speaker one. So the people who read the opening arguments at the beginning of the round, they will now give the summary. The role of the summary is to begin crystallizing the round. This means that you want, because in the constructive and the rebuttal speech, you will have many different arguments and counter arguments, and it could get confusing for the judge. But in the summary speech, you want to start limiting the scope of the debate and making clear to the judge why they should vote for you. Judge, vote for us because we're winning on the issue of lives, or we're winning on the issue of homework, or we're winning on the issue of suicide, or whatever you're winning on. And you want to do two other things. First of all, you want to protect your own arguments, because in the rebuttal speech, your opponents have attacked your opening arguments. You want to defend them from the opponent's attacks. Secondly, you want to weigh. So that's just a fancy way of saying you want to compare your argument to theirs and explain why your argument is more important. So if, let's say, your opponents have an impact, they say that if you believe them, the economy, or if, let's say your opponents say, social media is good for the economy, and if you vote for social media, the economy will continue to grow by 10%. Whereas if you're on the con, you might be saying social media makes all of these mental health issues, it's pushing teenagers to suicide, so we're impacting to lives. Then as con, you would want to explain, judge, lives are the most important thing in this debate because lives are always more important than money. And then you would try to compare the arguments and explain to the judge why, even if they believe their arguments, they should still vote for you. Then after that, we will have our grand crossfire. So the grand crossfire is basically where all 4 speakers get to ask each other questions at the same time. These frequently become a little bit messy. That's okay. Lastly, we have the final focus. So the final focus is 2 minutes. It's the last speech in the round. And in the final focus, you want to tell a story. So you want to tell the judge a story of what's going to happen if they vote, all of the good things that are going to happen if they vote for your side, and all of the bad things that are going to happen if they vote for the opponent's side. And you want to continue to explain why your arguments are true. So you want to keep defending and protecting them. And you also want to continue to explain why your arguments are the most important. But you should continue to simplify the round. So honestly, by the final focus, you should really only be focusing on one argument on your side. You don't want to try to win an argument about homework and buses and climate change. You shouldn't try to win every single argument. You should try to win only one and the most important. Why? Because it makes life easy for the judge. It helps the judge understand what you're saying, and when life is easy for the judge, they tend to make life easy for you, if you catch my meaning. All right. Let's see. In terms of crossfire, just a few norms in general during the debate. So in crossfire, you want to have a balance between you want to be assertive. So you want to stand up for yourself, but you don't want to be aggressive and attacking the opponent. So in public forum debate, we focus on the clash of ideas. We don't focus on the clash of personal insults. So personal insults, direct attacks to other debaters or to the judge, calling them stupid or fat or I don't know, that's not okay. And that's not what public forum debate is about. Don't waste your weekend making personal attacks. And if you make personal attacks, you are violating the rules of this tournament, and there's a chance that you will just lose the round entirely just for those personal attacks. Also, don't say anything discriminatory, racist, sexist, etc. And you should really be focusing only on the ideas. Now, I've judged hundreds of rounds, and none of the stuff I've just said has ever happened, but I have to say it just as a matter of protocol. I know nothing like that is going to happen at this tournament. Lastly, you want to, if the crossfire is allowed to be a little passionate. So if you get passionate about your ideas and you're a little bit loud about which arguments are winning, that's okay. Some judges actually like the passion, but other judges don't. And so it really depends on the judge's preference. Of course, this passion has to be constrained to the realm of ideas, not to the realm of people. Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the constructive speech. This is the 4-minute speech that you'll be doing and preparing in advance for this tournament. So once again, the speech is read by the first speaker, but it will be pre-written by both speakers of the team. And you will prepare a pro speech and a con speech. Each speech will have 1 to 3 arguments. These are called contentions. And remember that your arguments should have a claim, a warrant, and an impact. So you don't want to have 10 arguments or 20 arguments. You want to have 1 well-developed argument, or maybe 3 smaller arguments, or 2 arguments in between. That's because you're not going to win the public forum debate round based on the number of arguments you have. If you have 20 arguments and none of them are well developed, then you're not going to be able to convince the judge of any one of them. So the point, public forum isn't a contest of how many arguments I could think of, because everyone can think of many arguments. Instead, it's a contest of how good arguments I can think of and how well I can express these arguments. So if you, in your constructive speeches, if you have more than 3 arguments, you might want to change that, or you definitely want to change that. You should never have more than 3 contentions, period. You also want to end your speeches with the impact, because the impact is why the judge will vote for you. So you should end your constructive speech by telling the judge why your side is important, why they should vote for you. One thing that I've noticed people who aren't trained in public forum do, and one thing you should avoid. Some people go up there and they finish their 3 arguments in 3 minutes, and then they say, so in conclusion, judge, I have said these 3 ideas, and now I'm going to say a 4th idea because I have extra time. No, you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to spend any extra time you have further reinforcing why your arguments are important. We went over these don'ts. One last don't to do is you should not be introducing discussions that are irrelevant to the topic. So all of your arguments and ideas should be based on social media. And now a few things that you might want to do during public forum debate. You should prepare both sides of the topic. You should be professional and polite. You should focus on the clash of ideas in the debate. You should speak as persuasively as you can. Also, it's very important to tell the judge why your side deserves to win. So that's the impact again. You should stay focused on the social media topic. You should make complete arguments, claim, warrant, and impact. And lastly, have a fun time, try to win, and learn. Okay. Cool. So, perfect. So what we're going to do after this is I'm going to talk briefly about the structure of the tournament. But before I do that, I would like to open this up to questions because I know I've just said a lot of stuff in a short period of time. So if anyone has questions, feel free to ask. This is the Q&A session.
I have a question. Do we have 3 minutes to prepare the summary and the final focus?
Yes, thank you. So in the public forum debate round, you have 3 minutes of prep time. So this is prep time that you can take as a team at the beginning or right before any speech. So, okay. So, for example, if you feel that you need time to prepare for summary, you could take all the 3 minutes right before summary and prepare for that. Or you could split it up between summary and final focus. You could also take some time to prepare the rebuttal, but in total, the time that you take as a team has to add up to 3 minutes. So I could do 1 minute rebuttal, 1 minute before summary, 1 minute before final focus. I could do 2 minutes before summary and 1 before final focus. Now, I'll give you a trick of the trade. Summary is the most important speech in the round. And I would recommend you take most of your prep time before summary. Here's why. Your speeches need to be linked. So even though you are 2 different speakers, your team wins and loses as a team. So in the partnership, you will either both lose or both win. So because of that, you need to have the same strategy and be continuing to talk about the same arguments throughout the debate round. So if, let's say in summary, you're on Con for social media and you focus on this idea of suicide, but then in final focus, your partner goes and decides, no, I want to focus instead on the idea of the economy, then that is not a good thing because you have now confused the judge because in summary, you're saying one thing, in final focus, you're saying another. One thing to mention is everything that you say in final focus, every idea that you bring up should have been brought up in summary. So before summary, you should meet, coordinate with your partner how you plan to win the round. Just to be clear, when I say that every idea needs to be in summary, I'm basically saying every contention or every argument, so has to be said in summary. But you can figure out new ways to compare the same arguments in final focus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. And also, Andrea, did I answer your original question?
Yes, I understood.
Perfect. Okay.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How do we figure out if we are on the pro side or on the con side?
Perfect. Okay, so at the beginning of the debate round, before you say the constructive speech, there will be a coin flip. So one member, so of the 4 debaters, one debater, it really doesn't matter who, will predict the coin flip. And the coin can either be heads or tails. I think in Romanian it's like cap and bajura, something like that. Yeah. And then the judge will flip the coin. And the way that's going to happen, I'll talk to the judges about this in the judge training section of this. But basically they will share the screen and there's this online coin flip app that they can use. And they click the button, the coin flips. So if the team, let's say if the team predicted heads and the coin was heads, they win the coin flip. The winner of the coin flip can choose either the speaking order or the side. So they could choose whether they want to be the first team that begins the debate, the second team that ends the debate. Or they can choose if they want to be pro or con. So and they can only choose one of those two attributes. So if, let's say, the team that won the coin flip chose their side, the other team will choose their speaking order. Here's an example. Let's say Stefan Mindirigiu and I are on opposing teams, and we flip the coin, and I win the coin flip, and I choose to be con. So now we know that my team is con, and because I am con, Stefan's team has to be pro. Then Stefan will come and say whether he wants his team to be first to speak or last to speak. Now, let's say he wants his team to be last to speak. Now, my team will have to be the first to speak. So then at the end of the day, I will be the first speaking team that is con, and he will be the second speaking team that is pro. It sounds a bit convoluted, but I think you'll get the hang of it. And I'm seeing a lot of nods, so that's reassuring me. Does that make sense to everyone?
Sure. Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Yes.
Andre, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So
I
now,
have a question as well.
sure.
When it comes down to teammates, how do we choose which one is the speaker A and which one is the speaker B? Is it an order based on us, or is it a specific order?
I see. So the teams will choose their order through the coin flip, but within each team, I think that's what you're asking, the two speakers in a partnership, they choose the order amongst themselves. So, and this should really be based on their strengths and their weaknesses. So in general, the first speaker should have a bit more flair because they are going to begin the round. They are reading a speech. You want to read the speech slowly. You want to read the speech persuasively. The summary speech, which is very important, needs a lot of flair. So the more flary person of the partnership should be the first speaker, whereas the second speaker needs to be the person who is very good at just responding to arguments logically. They don't necessarily have to be an amazing speaker. They just have to be able to get their points across and just dissect the opponent's case.
All right. So I too have a question.
Sure. Could you speak up a bit because I can't really hear you?
Yeah, this is better.
Yeah.
Right. So when you explained the format of the debate and the steps we take, you said, paraphrasing, of course, judge. This is why my argument matters. Do we actually have to address the judge, or do we address the opposing team and then the judge?
Okay. That's actually a very good question. So you don't necessarily have to say the word judge if you don't feel comfortable. However, in the debate, you are not addressing the opposing team. You will never convince the opposing team of your side because they have to debate the other side. So you should be aiming to look at the judge and focus on convincing the judge. So you're addressing the judge. You're not really directly addressing the opposing team. This is more important in in-person debates compared to online. In in-person debates in the Crossfire, we actually recommend that the two speakers stand side by side and both face the judge instead of looking at each other. So it feels a little weird. I see some laughter. It feels a little weird, but it makes a lot of sense because it lets you give an answer and look straight at the judge's eyes and really get your point across. So yeah, you're addressing the judge. You're not addressing the opposing team.
I have a question about the Grand Crossfire. We are all supposed to talk, but how are we going to do? Who's the first one to talk, or who's the second?
Okay, so in Crossfire, in general, the team that speaks first gets the first question. This is just a general thing. In Grand Crossfire, the first speaking team, the team that started the debate round, gets the first question. Beyond that, there's no prescribed order for who has to speak and when. That's why I said Grand Crossfire can become sometimes a bit of a free-for-all. I would just say, I mean, look, people have conversations with more than 4 people without a set order, and those conversations usually don't devolve into, you know, shouting matches. Like, I can go and talk to my 10 friends and have a group conversation, and we manage to do that even though we don't have like a specific order of who has to speak. So it's the same thing with the Grand Crossfire. The first speaking team gets the first question. Beyond that, just be polite and speak in whatever order is convenient. That's a great question, by the way. I see some stuff in the chat.
I'm sorry. I had another question, but you could just answer that and I'll come back with my question.
Sure, definitely. So Daria asks, when are we going to know if we're debating the pros and cons?
Yeah, I asked that before, but you responded it
Yeah.
before, after I asked.
Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Miruna Statone.
Yes, well, I have a question. Do we need to prepare a rebuttal speech, like a written one, or just, you know, confront the other team?
Okay, that's a great question. So it depends on a lot of factors. In general, rebuttal speeches are hard to prepare because you don't know what the opponents are going to argue ahead of time. That being said, so I don't recommend that you just write out a 4-minute speech hoping you're just going to meet those arguments and it's going to work. What I do recommend, however, is thinking of what are the major arguments in this social media topic? What are the best arguments the pro and the con can give? And then I would suggest thinking, if they make this argument, what is the logic I will say in response? So rebuttals should generally be centered around the logic of why the opponents are wrong. If you also happen to have evidence from your contentions or evidence from somewhere else that you can use to further disprove their argument, I highly recommend that. You can also like compile a little bit of evidence, a few news articles that could disprove some very common arguments made by the opponents. And then
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you. I thought that we just have to prepare another speech, so that was a bit unclear for me, but thank you.
Yeah, the only speech that you 100% have to prepare is just 2 4-minute speeches that are your opening arguments. That's the only thing you'll need. Everything else is stuff that you could do extra to get yourself in a better position for the tournament, but it's not 100% mandatory. So you could think about one other thing I recommend, one other extra little thing if you want you can do, is to think of responses that can be made to your own arguments and then think how you will defend your arguments from those responses. So you can do all of that thinking beforehand, but it's not mandatory. It's not needed for you to compete.
May I ask another question?
Sure.
When it comes down to rebuttal speech, if our opponents mention a not so reliable source like a news outlet that we all know is not really that reliable and it's mainly about a lot of fake news, if we mention that, is it a valid point?
Yes, yes. So that gets into evidence ethics, which is a whole shish kebab in debate. But yeah, so logic matters, evidence matters. If their opening arguments have some vague logic, but their evidence is wrong, you can attack them by the evidence. If you have evidence to prove they are wrong, and they do not have evidence that actually proves their argument, then that is a great point to bring up. One other thing you could also do, if you think their evidence is a little bit suspicious or too good to be true, I recommend that you could actually ask them to send that piece of evidence to you. And then you can take prep time and read through their evidence to see how valid it is. So that's one thing you could do.
And about that, I wanted to ask that if we are allowed to use internet at the time we're talking or the others talk.
Yeah, you're allowed to use the internet. So it used to be that you weren't allowed to use the internet because people feared that, oh, you might be looking up stuff and doing research during the debate round. But the policy in the US has since changed. And the reason is, if you're going to use the internet to prepare new arguments in the middle of the debate round, that's not a good thing to do. And it's not going to help you. So yes, you have access to the internet, and you can use the internet for Google Drive. If you want to like share your contention with the other partner, you can use it to send evidence.
I was asking because if we are not sure about the other's team evidence, maybe we could look up and convince ourselves, or we just have to ask for them from the other opponent.
Yeah, you should ask the opponent to give it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, by the way.